Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the dim chambers of medieval royalty, where you wake not to an alarm clock, but to the soft clatter of servants unlatching wooden shutters while the cold morning air noses its way inside. You're still half asleep, staring at a canopy so heavy it could double as a winter cloak, and you already know this is one of those mornings where you probably won't survive the royal schedule. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I always love reading those. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day as medieval royalty begins before you're fully conscious, which is convenient, because the palace does not believe in personal space or slow starts. You lie in a massive bed, stuffed with straw, feathers, or if you're unlucky, a creative mix of both. It creaks loudly the moment you shift, almost as if whispering, "Good morning, Your Majesty. I resent your existence." Even the furniture has opinions here. Before you can stretch, attendants file in like a parade of tiptoeing ghosts. They carry linens, trays, steaming pitchers, and the soft hope that you won't suddenly decide to issue royal orders before breakfast. A few bow, with the enthusiasm of people who know their salary depends on your mood. One whispers about the weather, because medieval meteorologists mostly rely on looking out the window and guessing. A mainstream historical fact slips into your morning. Royalty often slept in separate rooms from their spouses, not due to drama, but because drafts, illness, and nighttime noise made shared beds a surprisingly strategic risk. You, of course, get the good room, which still feels colder than an abandoned fridge. You tug the blanket tighter and pretend this is fine. It's not, but that's part of the charm. Your eyes adjust to the dim light. The room smells faintly of beeswax and last night's smoke, a classic medieval signature scent. Attendants approach with warm cloths to dab your face and hands, a kind of proto-skincare routine that doesn't involve serums, but does involve two people hovering over you like anxious makeup artists. Historians still argue whether royalty genuinely enjoyed this pampering or merely tolerated it, because refusing would cause a minor political incident. Either way, you sit there, letting someone else pat your cheeks at dawn. The strangest part is that while you're technically the most important person in the building, you can't even get out of bed privately. One quirky but true tidbit. Some monarchs had designated bed watchers, attendants who slept nearby, specifically to monitor nighttime needs, security concerns, or the occasional sleep-talking gossip session that could definitely start a civil war if overheard by the wrong noble. You shift again, trying to wake fully. One attendant brings you a warming stone wrapped in cloth. Another adjusts the bed curtains with a theatrical flourish, as though the sun itself is waiting for your permission to rise. You're still groggy, still wishing for 5 more minutes, but medieval royalty doesn't get snooze, buttons-only responsibilities masquerading as rituals. A humorous detail. Your royal nightshirt is probably longer than some modern dresses, and definitely less flattering. If medieval fashion influencers existed, they would be very confused. The servants discuss the day's schedule in hushed tones, meetings, prayers, audiences, a feast you didn't ask for, and the possibility of a jester whose sense of humor peaked in the 14th century. You give a tired nod. This is fine. This is normal. You are royalty. Half symbol, half human, and wholly exhausted. You finally swing your feet out of bed. Floor is stone, shockingly cold, as if trying to remind you that even monarchs must suffer. Attendants rush to place slippers before your toes even touch the ground. They fuss, straighten, bow, and whisper. You try to look regal, though you're pretty sure your hair currently resembles a medieval haystack with ambition. The palace outside your chamber stirs too. Somewhere down the corridor, a guard clears his throat with enough volume to shake lint off the tapestries. A maid drops a bucket, mutters a prayer, and hurries away. A dog barks, possibly royal, possibly just lost. Castles were basically the original open-plan offices, with all the noise and none of the ergonomic chairs. And there you are, rising slowly, blinking sleep from your eyes as steam curls upward from the warm basin nearby. The morning rituals unfold exactly as they have for generations, carefully choreographed, deeply symbolic, occasionally ridiculous. But as you stand there, wrapped in a robe thick enough to serve as insulation for a small cottage, you start to understand something. Royalty in the medieval world didn't just wake up, they performed waking up, Every gesture is watched. Every sigh is interpreted. Every wrinkle in your bedsheets might spark 3 rumors and at least 1 ballad. You inhale deeply, the air cool and faintly echoing with the day ahead. Your strange life as medieval royalty has only just begun. You're barely awake, but the palace has already decided it's time for you to be transformed from sleep-rumpled human into shining emblem of divine authority, which unfortunately requires the participation of half the court before you can even process the morning air. Attendants begin filing in slowly, ritually, and with the hushed seriousness usually reserved for ancient ceremonies or someone trying not to spill soup on a white carpet. They circle around you with armfuls of fabrics, brushes, belts, and items whose function you absolutely do not remember. Approving. This is the medieval version of a glam squad, except instead of contouring your cheekbones, they're making sure your tunic doesn't imply weakness and your shoes don't reflect political instability. You lift your arms, still groggy, and a cascade of linen layers begins wrapping around you like a very confused chrysalis. A mainstream historical fact for this moment. European monarchs were often dressed by attendants of high rank, sometimes nobles, because the privilege of touching royal garments was considered a sign of favor. That means these people aren't just helping you put on socks. They're playing a high-stakes social game, where being allowed to hand you a sleeve could mean getting land grants later. No pressure or anything. As you stand there, one attendant combs your hair with an expression of spiritual devotion. Another checks your cuffs for stains, as if medieval laundry could ever produce perfection. A third gently dusts your shoulders with something aromatic, some blend of herbs meant to say, "You smell powerful." You fight the urge to laugh because it's too early for irony, but here you are, being groomed like a prized falcon. A quirky tidbit slips into your morning. Some monarchs kept official barbers, whose duties included hair trimming, shaving, medical bloodletting, and occasional dentistry. Yes, the person wielding a razor near your throat is also the guy people see when they need a molar yanked. Somehow, this does not help you relax. You stretch your fingers while attendants slide rings onto them, heavy gold circles engraved with symbols you haven't fully memorized. The ruby one means justice. The sapphire one means divine favor. The slightly crooked one means your grandfather had questionable taste. They clink softly as you flex, like tiny reminders that your knuckles are technically state property. The grooming continues with a precision that would put modern spa workers to shame. Someone adjusts the fall of your cloak. Someone else smooths the lining. And someone, there's always one, keeps stepping back, squinting and whispering, a little to the left, as though you're a decorative vase and not a living person trying not to sneeze. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were genuinely functional or mostly symbolic theater meant to reaffirm the hierarchy. Either way, you're stuck in the middle of it, arms outstretched, letting strangers decide which belt buckle best, communicates monarch who might punish treason before lunch. As the attendants work, they chatter softly about palace rumors. You catch fragments. A noble arguing with his cousin about hunting rights. Someone spotting an omen-shaped cloud. The queen's lapdog refusing to eat unless fed by a specific servant. It's always something. Court gossip accumulates like dust in the corners everywhere, impossible to avoid, and mildly alarming when stirred. One attendant steps forward with a small, bronze mirror. The image staring back at you is, well, it's a lot. Your hair is neatly arranged, your robe artfully draped, and your posture forcibly corrected. You look like someone who absolutely did not spend the night kicking at blankets, grumbling at the cold, and wondering if the mattress was trying to negotiate union rights. You give a slow nod. Everyone exhales as if they were holding their breath for your approval. Monarchs don't choose their clothes. They sanction them. A small joke lands in your mind. You're effectively being cosplayed as yourself. They continue adjusting your attire, adding the last touches, brooches, jewels, clasps, and layers that feel like wearing a portable tapestry exhibit. The weight of your garments is genuinely astonishing. Medieval royalty didn't do lightweight. Your cloak alone could double as winter roofing material. Finally, they step back and wait. The transformation is complete. You are now fully groomed, fully layered, and fully aware that you can't bend down to tie your own shoes without assistance. You test one small movement. Your elbow catches on a sleeve. A few attendants gasp. Another rushes in to fix the fabric. You apologize instinctively, then remember, you're not supposed to say sorry. You're royalty. Your sleeve disrespected you. A brief moment of silence settles over the room. The attendants bow and withdraw in practiced order. You feel both regal and very slightly ridiculous, which is the correct emotional blend for medieval royalty. Your day is waiting, and unfortunately for your shoulders, none of it involves lighter clothing. You're finely groomed to royal perfection, hair smoothed, sleeves tamed, cloak arranged like you're about to appear in a medieval fashion catalogue nobody asked for. Now comes breakfast, which sounds comforting, but medieval royalty had a remarkable talent for turning even a simple meal into a ceremonial performance. You head toward the morning table, guided by attendants who walk backward as if you'll explode if they turn their backs too soon. The great hall is cool and shadowed, lit by tall windows that leak in thin stripes of morning light. Your stomach rumbles with cautious optimism, but optimism was not a core ingredient in medieval cuisine. You sit at a long, narrow table, even though you're the only one allowed to sit there while your attendants hover like anxious storks. A mainstream historical fact arrives with your first dish. Breakfast wasn't the grand affair people imagine. Royalty often ate something simple, bread, cheese, or pottage, because the big show came at midday. That said, simple doesn't mean normal, because you are about to eat bread made from wheat so expensive it was basically edible treasure. Your servants place it gently before you, as if it's the crown jewel's carb-based cousin. Then there's the ale. Yes, ale. For breakfast. You take a cautious sip, trying to look dignified, while your brain quietly says, "It's too early for this." Medieval morning beverages had one job, not kill you. Water was famously unreliable in this era. A light joke bubbles up in your thoughts. You miss your modern coffee, even if it never once came with a squire who bowed before handing it to you. Another dish appears, a small plate of pickled vegetables that smell like ambition and questionable preservation methods. You take a bite, and it's fine. Strange, crunchy, sour, in ways you weren't emotionally prepared for. A quirky but true tidbit: some medieval royals believed pickles warmed the humours, even though no one fully agreed on what that meant. Historians still argue whether this belief had actual medicinal roots, or if someone simply liked pickles and invented a medical excuse. As you chew, attendants stand silently nearby, watching your every move with delicate concern. If you drop a crumb, someone dives for it like it's precious evidence. If your cup dips below half full, another servant rushes in with a pitcher, overfilling it with the nervous eagerness of someone who knows a spilled drop could ruin their career. You glance at the side table. There's a small dish of salted fish waiting there, thin, oily, and shiny enough to serve as a tiny aquatic mirror. You consider ignoring it. Unfortunately, ignoring royal food is frowned upon. You take a cautious taste. The fish stares back at you with judgment. You try not to take it personally. Some royalty, depending on era and region, preferred morning meats, bacon-like cuts, stews from last night, or even cold roasted birds. A footman whispers your options, but you choose bread again. Bread is your friend. Bread is safe. Bread has never betrayed anyone, except occasionally when it's so hard it could be used as a weapon. As you eat, a courtier appears with parchment in hand. This is the medieval equivalent of someone bringing their work laptop to breakfast, rude, but inevitable. You want your decision on a request from a minor noble who claims his neighbour's rooster is possessed. You stare at the parchment, then at your bread, then back at the parchment. You sigh softly and make a mental note to revisit this nonsense later. Preferably never. In between bites, you overhear two attendants whisper about the kitchen's morning chaos. One mentions that the palace chickens escaped and were last seen terrorizing a hallway. You try not to smile. Even monarchs need a little morning entertainment. Your meal concludes with a small cup of something warm, spiced wine or herbal tisane, depending on what your royal physician believes is best for your balance of humours today. The blend smells like cloves, mint, and maybe a hint of good luck surviving this century. You sip slowly, letting the warmth drift through your chest. Yet, for all the ceremony, you're still hungry. Medieval breakfasts weren't meant to fill you, they were meant to prepare you for the day's real work. Audiences, decisions, and situations where a monarch's stomach growling could spark rumours about famine. One last detail lands on your plate. A tiny piece of fruit, rare, precious, and symbolic. You eat it with exaggerated delicacy, partly because it's protocol, and partly because every attendant is watching as though this bite will determine the kingdom's future crop yield. You rise when your attendants signal that you've had sufficient nourishment, despite the fact that you definitely haven't. They gather your dishes with silent precision, clearing the table as if breakfast never happened. You wipe your hands, stand tall, and prepare to enter the next ritual of royal life, the morning audience. Your day is only beginning. Yet you already feel like you've done enough to justify a nap. Unfortunately, medieval royalty didn't do naps. They did stress, symbolism, and more formality than any human should experience before noon. And so you walk on, your stomach half full, your cloak impossibly heavy, and your morning only getting stranger from here. You leave the breakfast table with the cautious optimism of someone hoping the morning might calm down, but medieval royalty is allergic to calm. The moment you step into the audience chamber, the air changes thick with incense, whispers, and that distinct, everyone wants something from you tension. You take a slow breath and straighten your cloak, which weighs roughly as much as a modern toddler. The morning audience isn't a single event. It's a conveyor belt of nobles, advisors, distant relatives, petitioners, worried peasants, arrogant knights, and at least one person who's here for reasons you will never fully grasp. They stand in a semicircle, shifting from foot to foot like anxious pigeons, waiting for their turn to kneel, bow, and unleash their problems upon you. A mainstream historical fact walks in with the first petitioner. Monarchs often held daily levees, structured gatherings where nobles and officials were granted limited access to the sovereign. These weren't casual chats. The order in which someone approached you, how long they stayed, and who stood closest could spark rivalries that lasted generations. No pressure. The chamber is chilly, echoing with distant steps and muffled voices. Sunlight slices through stained glass windows, coloring the floor in patches of red and blue. You sit on the throne not because it's comfortable. It absolutely isn't. But because it's symbolic. The seat is stiff, narrow, and designed more for intimidation than lumbar support. Historians still argue whether some thrones were intentionally uncomfortable to keep rulers alert, or simply built by craftsmen who underestimated the human spine. Your first visitor is a noble with eyebrows so dramatic they might deserve their own title. He launches into a complaint about land boundaries, accusing his neighbor of inching a fence post 3 feet onto his estate. You nod seriously, as if this micro-territorial squabble isn't the least exciting thing you'll hear today. You offer a diplomatic answer, and he bows so deeply you fear he might not get back up. Next comes a knight who wants permission to host a tournament in your honor. A lavish, expensive, time-consuming event that will require you to smile politely while armored men try to stab each other artistically. You murmur something non-committal, giving the royal equivalent of "I'll think about it," which is medieval code for "this will probably never happen." A quirky tidbit enters with the third petitioner. In some courts, people brought bizarre offerings to earn the monarch's favor, including rare animals, oversized vegetables, or strangely shaped stones believed to possess magical properties. Today, a merchant approaches you, holding a goose with feathers tinted purple dyed, he claims, as a sign of his loyalty. The goose honks with chaotic energy. You pretend this is normal. It is not. Between the petitions, attendants bring you warm cloths for your hands, scented herbs to soothe royal stresses, and cups of watered wine. You sip with caution. Morning wine is worst-case scenario wine, and the last thing you need is to accidentally agree to fund someone's quest for a mythical lake monster. The next visitor is a scholar carrying a stack of parchment taller than your breakfast loaf. He launches into a detailed explanation of tax reforms, referencing diagrams and charts that look suspiciously like doodles. You maintain a regal expression while your inner voice quietly screams. Historians still argue whether monarchs actually understood every policy presented to them, or if half the job was pretending convincingly while waiting for advisors to simplify things later. One of your favorite unspoken audience traditions appears. The courtier, who dramatically clears his throat before speaking, as though preparing to sing an opera instead of asking permission to buy sheep. You nod seriously, because dignity is the glue holding this whole room together. A messenger arrives breathless with news from a distant village, flooding, famine, or perhaps a cow that mysteriously gives milk only at midnight. Medieval reports are inconsistent at best. You give your orders, trying to sound wise, though you secretly wonder why no one has invented a better communication system yet. Smoke signals would be an upgrade. The audience continues for what feels like 14 hours, but is probably less than one. People shuffle in and out, each bringing a new problem, request, rumor, or overly detailed personal grievance. Your royal face remains politely neutral, but inside, you're imagining yourself back in bed, wrapped in blankets, pretending the entire monarchy is someone else's responsibility. Another noble approaches, bowing dramatically enough to risk pulling a muscle. He whispers about a scandal involving someone's daughter, someone's hunting dog, and someone's conveniently absent chaperone. The story twists and tangles until you doubt any of it is true. Gossip here spreads faster than fire in a thatched roof. Near the end, a worried peasant woman steps forward, trembling, humble, awestruck. Her hands shake as she explains her village's failing crops. You listen carefully, because this is one of the few moments that feels truly grounded. You give her a fair ruling, and her relieved smile softens the room more than the tapestries ever could. Finally, after the last petitioner bows out and the chamber quiets, you rise slowly. Your legs are stiff, your mind is buzzing, and your voice slightly hoarse from regal diplomacy. The attendants gather around, waiting for you to signal the next move. You walk out with the careful grace of someone who survived a morning of political juggling, social theatre, and at least one goose. The palace halls stretch before you, draughty, dim, and full of mysteries, and you're headed straight into their cold embrace. Your day is far from over. You step out of the audience chamber, relieved to leave behind the bowing nobles, the diplomatic tightrope walking, and the goose you are still trying to emotionally process. But the palace doesn't give you even a moment to collect yourself. Instead, you're swallowed by the long, drafty halls, endless stone corridors that feel like they were designed specifically to challenge your body heat and your patience. The air here is colder, sharper, rolling against your freshly groomed hair in a way that makes you regret every layer your attendants meticulously arranged. You walk forward, your footsteps echoing so loudly you wonder if the stones are gossiping about your posture. Medieval castles love to creak, sigh, and mutter at all hours. It's part architecture, part attitude. A mainstream historical fact greets you with the chill. Castles were notoriously cold, damp, and poorly insulated, even for royalty. Walls several feet thick trapped the cold just as effectively as they kept out invaders. Fireplaces helped, but helped is generous. You'd need a bonfire the size of a wagon to warm these corridors. As you move, you instinctively wrap your cloak tighter, trying to pretend you aren't shivering like a leaf in a medieval windstorm. Servants scurry around you, carrying baskets, tapestries, tools, or the occasional bewildered chicken that somehow made its way inside again. The hallways are a living ecosystem of people who know exactly where they're going and exactly how fast they need to get there to avoid being blamed for something. You admire their determination as one nearly slides across the stones while gripping a stack of linens like sacred treasure. You pause near a tapestry depicting your great-grandfather slaying something that may or may not be a dragon. Historians still argue whether he actually fought anything or simply paid an artist to make his hunting trip look more interesting. You nod respectfully to the mythical beast anyway. It feels like the polite thing to do. As you continue walking, a breeze hits you from nowhere, carrying the faint scent of smoke and boiled cabbage. Medieval air truly is a sensory adventure. You pass narrow arrow slits that let in slivers of daylight and slivers of freezing wind. Even royalty isn't exempt from the cold ankles phenomenon. One light joke drifts through your mind. If castles had modern insulation, half the medieval population would have thought it was witchcraft. You turn a corner and nearly trip over a wooden chest left unattended. A servant leaps into view, panicked, apologizing profusely while standing so close to a bow you fear he may fold himself in half. You wave him off, offering a gentle reassurance. He practically melts with relief. You consider telling him it's fine, but he already sprinted away at speeds that violate several laws of physics. The halls are lined with niches holding statues, relics, and the occasional dusty leftover from a festival 3 years ago. You spot a cracked ceremonial mask, a faded wreath of dried herbs, and a wooden puppet that looks like it's plotting your demise. Medieval decor is an unpredictable blend of reverence, superstition, and items people were too afraid to throw away because what if the spirits get offended? Another quirky tidbit guides your next steps. Royalty often consulted omens or superstitions when choosing which route to walk in the palace. Certain corridors were believed to carry better luck. Others were thought to attract illness, misfortune, or nosy courtiers. You've heard at least 2 servants whisper that the North Passage smells like curses. Today, you avoid it. Today does not feel like a curse-embracing day. You move deeper into the castle, where the windows thin out and the light fades. Torches flicker along the walls, casting wobbly shadows that dance like over-caffeinated ghosts. The creaking intensifies, wooden beams settling, distant doors closing, invisible, drafts brushing past. Medieval buildings are never quiet. They mutter constantly, as if complaining that humans keep living inside them. Halfway down the hall, you pass two guards standing at rigid attention. Their armor clinks quietly as they bow. One looks exhausted, the other looks like he's trying very hard not to sneeze. You give them a nod before continuing. Being royalty means silently acknowledging dozens of people a day, with facial expressions that must convey, "I appreciate you. I see you. And please don't panic." All at once. You reach a particularly gloomy junction where several corridors intersect, like the world's saddest indoor labyrinth. A draft curls around your ankles, colder than everything else you've felt so far. For a moment, you wonder if a ghost is passing through medieval castles always had at least 3 rumoured spectres, though half were probably just tired servants moving too fast. Historians still argue whether these cold spots were caused by structural quirks, or whether the countless stories of hauntings reflect a genuine belief in restless spirits. You decide not to investigate. Royalty may be powerful, but ghosts are famously unimpressed by titles. As you move through the drafty passages, you're reminded how much of a monarch's life is shaped by the building they live in. Stone walls keep you safe, but they also keep you chilled, watched, and surrounded by constant movement. You can't take 10 steps without encountering a servant, a guard, a noble, a tapestry, or a draft determined to cut through your cloak like it's tissue paper. You pass a window overlooking the courtyard. The wind whistles through the cracks, making a sound eerily similar to someone attempting a dramatic sigh. Below, you see workers hauling supplies, children chasing each other near the well, and a cat sitting on a barrel like it owns the place. It probably does. You continue your walk, feet tapping rhythmically across the glide. Stone. The corridor's cold grip hangs around you like an extra cloak, not quite comforting, but undeniably real. The castle is alive in its own way, breathing, shifting, whispering. And you, wrapped in wool and ceremony, move through it like both master and captive. You're nearly to your next destination, though you already know the drafty halls will follow you everywhere. Medieval royalty doesn't just command the palace, they endure it. And the palace, with its cold corridors and strange acoustics, seems endlessly amused by your efforts to stay warm and dignified. You step out of the drafty hallways and into a smaller, warmer chamber, where a basin, linens, herbs, and a collection of vaguely alarming containers wait for you. It's time for your royal hygiene routine, a phrase that sounds much nicer than what it usually involves. Medieval royalty lived in a world where cleanliness was as much about symbolism as sanitation, and you're about to experience that delicate balance firsthand. The attendants gather around you with gentle voices and brisk hands. They move with the precision of a team who has done this 1,000 times and still whispers prayers that today won't involve unexpected royal allergies. One pours warm water into a bronze basin, another lifts a scented cloth the way a florist might present a rare bloom. You inhale, catching a mix of rosewater, sage, and whatever mystery plant the herbalist swears will protect your humors. A mainstream historical fact glides through the steam. Contrary to popular myths, medieval royals did bathe, just not every day. Full-body baths were occasional events, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly, and sometimes only for special occasions. But washing with scented cloths, herbal waters, and warm rinses, that happened daily, especially for the nobility. And now it's happening to you, whether you're mentally prepared or not. Your attendants dab your face with warm cloths, patting in small circles, like they're gently buffing a precious statue. They wash your hands meticulously, fingers to wrists, then dry them with embroidered towels that somehow manage to be rougher than they look. You hold still, letting them work, while your brain quietly notes you've become the world's most pampered yet least autonomous adult. A quirky tidbit enters the routine. Some medieval royals used mixtures like vinegar, rosemary infusions, or even wine to cleanse their skin. One monarch famously believed wine was the only proper substance for washing, which definitely sounds like a coping mechanism more than a dermatological philosophy. You half wonder if today is a wine-washing day. You half hope it's not. You brace yourself when someone approaches with a small jar of tooth powder. Medieval dental care is bold. The powder smells like cloves and crushed mint, but you know from whispered stories that other versions can include salt, burnt herbs, or powdered bone. Historians still argue whether these mixtures helped or harmed teeth in the long run. You choose not to think too hard, as the attendant hands you a cloth-wrapped twig used as a toothbrush. You scrub gently, trying to project confidence, though inside you're negotiating with the universe for mercy. Next comes the hair care. Your attendants carefully comb your hair with wooden combs carved in spiraling designs, untangling knots from the cold hallway breezes. The combing takes longer than it should, partly because royalty must look immaculate, and partly because one attendant keeps pausing to ensure your hair falls with appropriate authority. You nod politely. You have no idea what authoritative hair looks like, but you trust the process. Someone brings forward a small bowl of herbal rinse. The mixture smells earthy and sharp, like a forest trying to wake up. It's dabbed along your scalp and neck, a refreshing, slightly startling sensation that makes you straighten involuntarily. A joke drifts through your mind. You now smell like a garden that takes itself very seriously. The attendants then move to your hands again, rubbing them with a paste of ground herbs and oils meant to soften skin and ward off illness. You wonder if this medieval lotion actually works, or if it's just a way to make you smell expensive. Either way, your palms tingle warmly. A more awkward part of the ritual approaches the inspection for health signs. A few attendants examine your complexion. Another checks your eyes. A third hums in concern at the dryness of your knuckles. Medieval society believed a ruler's physical condition reflected the kingdom's health, which is a lot of pressure for someone who just woke up 2 hours ago and ate pickled vegetables they didn't want. A court physician arrives unannounced, as they often do. He circles you with the grave expression of a man searching for symptoms only he understands. He asks how you slept. You tell him, well enough, which he interprets as, the moon's positioning was unfavorable. He nods solemnly and makes a note. You choose to let it go. One quirky superstition the physician insists on today is the placement of a small herb pouch inside your garments. It's supposed to protect you from corrupted air. You accept it graciously, tucking it away, though it feels like you've just been given the medieval equivalent of a scented stress ball. Historians still argue whether certain hygiene practices were truly effective or simply ritualistic displays of status and belief. But as you stand there feeling like a lightly perfumed herb garden wrapped in velvet, you decide it doesn't matter. Royalty is as much performance as reality. At last, the attendants step back. Your face is clean, your hands soft, your hair meticulously arranged, and your garments scented like an apothecary's best day ever. The air feels fresher, warmer, more bearable. You take a breath and slowly exhale. But as refreshed as you feel, you're acutely aware of the irony. Being royalty means never touching your own soap, never choosing your own routine, and never brushing your teeth without an audience. You step toward the doorway, ready to face the rest of your strange, ritual-filled day. Behind you, attendants begin packing up the basin and linens with practiced efficiency. You smell faintly of rosemary, warm cloths, and responsibility. Your morning continues. You leave the warm hygiene chamber feeling cleaner, lighter, and slightly more herb-scented than any one human should ever be. But now comes another sacred and surprisingly theatrical part of your royal morning, choosing what to wear for the rest of the day. As medieval royalty, you don't simply get dressed. You enter a ritual of symbolism, politics, superstition, and fashion choices that weigh more than some farm animals. Your wardrobe chamber is already bustling when you arrive. Attendants, tailors, and a few courtiers, who absolutely do not need to be here, hover around racks of robes, cloaks, tunics, belts, and jewels. The room smells faintly of wool, lavender sachets, and ambition. A soft gasp ripples through the attendants as you enter, part respect, part fear. They've selected the wrong tunic shade and doomed their careers. A mainstream historical fact greets you. Clothing for medieval royalty wasn't just fashion. It was propaganda. Every color, cut, and accessory signaled wealth, legitimacy, alliances, or even religious devotion. Purple was so expensive that wearing it was the medieval equivalent of driving a gold-plated sports car through a quiet village. Gold embroidery meant power. Deep blues whispered divine favor. Reds practically shouted, "Don't challenge me today." Your attendants immediately begin presenting options, lifting garments with the reverence usually reserved for holy relics. One offers a crimson cloak embroidered with lions. Another brings forward a blue velvet tunic heavy with pearls. A third displays a robe so layered it could double as winter housing. You study them, nodding as if you actually have a vote in this decision. A quirky tidbit swirls around the room. Some monarchs believed certain fabrics attracted heavenly protection, like silk warding off illness or linen repelling evil spirits. Others refuse to wear specific colors on unlucky days. You overhear one attendant whisper nervously about an astrologer's warning regarding yellow on Thursdays. Today is not Thursday, thankfully, but you still decide to avoid yellow just in case. Your main dresser approaches with what he calls a modest option, which is hilarious because it looks like a portable tapestry exhibit. The garment is thick, jewel-encrusted, and weighs enough that if you dropped it, it might injure the floor. You sigh softly and lift your arms. The attendants slide it over your head with synchronized precision. Immediately, your shoulders protest. Medieval royal clothing is less about comfort and more about announcing, "My lineage could crush your lineage with one awkwardly long sleeve." You try to shift, but the fabric resists. You momentarily consider running away to become a very fashionable hermit. As they fasten clasps along your chest and adjust the fall of your sleeves, one attendant murmurs about the symbolic animals embroidered across the fabric. Lions for strength, griffins for divine guardianship. A creature you don't even recognize, possibly a decorative potato representing good harvests. Historians still argue whether some of these symbols were chosen deliberately or simply because the embroiderer got bored and creative. Another attendant steps forward with your belt. It gleams with polished metal, gemstones, and intricate filigree. It also weighs roughly 5 kilograms. When he buckles it around your waist, you suddenly understand why medieval royalty had excellent posture they physically couldn't slouch. As you're being wrapped and buttoned into your royal ensemble, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the polished bronze mirror hanging nearby. You look expensive, overly ornate, grand, slightly ridiculous, a living art piece walking around pretending not to be at risk of tipping over from fabric weight. You shift your arm experimentally. It moves with all the grace of a wooden puppet. The attendants gasp, adjust your sleeve, and reassure you in hushed tones that the folds now rest with perfect majesty. You smile politely while wondering if anyone in this era has invented elastic. One light joke drifts through your mind. Medieval fashion must have been designed by people who hated sitting, bending, turning, or breathing deeply. Now comes the jewelry. Rings, brooches, pendants, and chains are brought forth in velvet-lined trays. You choose or pretend to choose a brooch shaped like a roaring beast. The symbolism is extremely dramatic, but honestly, you're feeling a little dramatic today. The attendants fasten it at your shoulder with a pin sharp enough to double as a diplomatic weapon. Then comes the crown. Not the main crown, of course. That one is reserved for coronations or moments when you need to remind everyone who runs the place. This is your daily crown, which still weighs more than a newborn goat. The attendants lift it with reverence and lower it onto your freshly combed, hopefully authoritative hair. You straighten instinctively under its weight. The metal is cool, the jewels glint softly, and the whole thing feels like a very fancy punishment. But once it settles, you feel it. The transformation. Clothing may be absurd, heavy, and mildly impractical, but it completes the persona the kingdom expects you to embody. Historians still debate whether monarchs genuinely loved these outfits or simply endured them as part of their role. Some portraits suggest pride. Others look suspiciously like someone trying not to faint from shoulder pressure. Your final accessory is placed around your neck, a pendant symbolizing your royal lineage. It hangs directly over your sternum, cold at first, then warming to your skin. You lift your chin, regal and ready, even though inside you're imagining yourself in soft pajamas and a blanket fort. The attendants step back, eyes wide, nearly glowing with satisfaction. You look like a tapestry came to life. You are the physical manifestation of authority, tradition, and medieval budget excess. And with every step you take, your garments whisper, sway, and glitter a portable reminder that royalty isn't just a title. It's a costume you must wear convincingly, even when it weighs more than your dignity. Your wardrobe is complete, your appearance is perfected, and somewhere in the distance, the palace begins preparing the next ritual of your day. You're fully dressed now, layered, jeweled, heavy enough to qualify as a decorative siege weapon, and it's time to face one of the most perilous rituals of royal life, the midday meal. Not because the food is dangerous, though some of it absolutely is, but because medieval dining etiquette is a labyrinth of rules, glances, gestures, and quiet judgment. You glide toward the great hall, your garments whispering like gossiping tapestries, your mind already preparing for the ordeal. The hall is alive with clatter and color, Sunlight slants through high windows, catching dust motes that drift lazily like drowsy fireflies. Tables line the room, packed with nobles, stewards, musicians, and officials who will spend this entire meal pretending they aren't watching your every move. You take your place at the high table, which sits on a raised platform, a literal stage, to remind everyone that you are the main event whether you asked for it or not. A mainstream historical fact greets you with the first serving tray. Medieval royalty usually ate separately from the masses, not for snobbery, well, maybe a little, but because status dictated distance. Yet even here, in your elevated seat, you are never alone. Courtiers hover nearby, eager to interpret every blink, sip, and sigh. The first dish arrives, a steaming bowl of pottage. It's a thick stew of grains, vegetables, and meats so finely chopped you'd need divine intervention to identify them. You dip your spoon, tasting warmth, herbs, and a texture somewhere between comfort and culinary mystery. Servants watch closely to ensure you approve. You nod with gentle diplomacy, because refusing food in front of an entire hall would create enough rumors to start a cultural movement. Next comes roasted fowl, probably goose, maybe duck, possibly something that was supposed to be a swan but changed its mind halfway through cooking. The bird is adorned with herbs, flowers, and a strangely decorative arrangement of feathers that feel less culinary masterpiece, and more, the kitchen tried something new without adult supervision. As you carve a slice, the hall buzzes with hushed conversation. You're aware of every eye turning subtly toward you. Dining as royalty means eating while being silently monitored by about 100 people trying not to seem like they're monitoring you. A quirky tidbit lands on your plate in the form of a gilded pastry shaped like a castle turret. Medieval chefs loved theatrics. Some meals included pies with live birds inside, which is as chaotic as it sounds, or elaborate sugar sculptures meant to impress ambassadors. Today's pastry merely contains minced meat and herbs. You're relieved it doesn't chirp. Your attendants come and go with precision, replacing trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread used as plates before yours can soak through. A servant wipes the table near you every few minutes, just in case your royal crumbs threaten international stability. And then, of course, comes the etiquette. Medieval dining rules were a full-contact sport of social survival. You remind yourself, do not lick your fingers. Do not wipe your knife on the tablecloth. Do not slurp, gulp, belch, grimace, or display any emotion suggesting food exists. Do not point with your eating dagger, even though it is literally the only utensil designed for pointing. Do not sigh too loudly or chew too quickly or cut bread the wrong ceremonial way, because someone at the far end of the hall will definitely interpret that as a political insult. Historians still argue whether some of these rules were truly enforced or simply exaggerated by etiquette manuals. Based on the watchful eyes around you, you suspect the truth lies somewhere between mildly strict and everyone has anxiety. You take small bites, deliberate sips, and careful pauses. Every gesture is a message. When you raise your cup, a servant instantly appears to refill it. When you dab your mouth with a cloth, the nobles mimic you like delayed reflections. In a strange way, you set the tempo of the entire hall. A musician's lute hums softly in the finade background. Harp notes drift faintly through the air, offering an illusion of calm that your overburdened shoulders desperately appreciate. The room smells of roasted meats, warm bread, spiced wine, and 7 perfumes competing for dominance. The next dish surprises you. A delicate bowl of candied roots, sweetened with honey and dusted with exotic spices. It's a luxury only the wealthy can afford. You take a bite, savoring the unexpected brightness. A humorous thought passes through your mind. If medieval people invented dessert cafes, the kingdom would immediately collapse from overindulgence. As the meal continues, nobles approach the table one by one to offer compliments, petitions, or subtle flattery disguised as weather commentary. You respond with serene politeness, even though you can feel your heavy garments slowly weighing down your soul. Toward the end, your steward presents the final dish. A small, ornate plate of almonds, dried figs, and wafers. A digestive course. You eat it carefully, hoping it balances the castle-sized meal you've just consumed. Then comes the hand-washing ritual. A servant pours scented water over your fingers, while another holds a bowl beneath your hands. The fragrance of lavender, mint, and warm citrus rises into the air. The gesture is elegant, soothing, necessary, and incredibly awkward when performed in front of an audience. At last, you stand. The hall rises with you, a wave of rustling fabrics and synchronized bows. You offer a nod, dignified and calm, even as your inner thoughts whisper that you would rather be lying under a warm blanket listening to rain. You step away from the table, leaving behind the clatter, the music, the watchful eyes, and the roasted bird that may or may not haunt your dreams later. Your afternoon awaits, and with it, more rituals, more expectations, and more strange corners of royal life. You adjust your heavy sleeves, inhale the scented air, and walk forward. Your day, as always, continues. You step out of the dining hall with the weary grace of someone who has just completed a public performance disguised as lunch. Your stomach is full, your cloak is heavy, and your soul is quietly praying for a nap. But medieval royalty doesn't get naps, royalty gets entertainment. And entertainment, in this era, is never what you expect. A servant leads you toward the solar, a warm upper room chamber reserved for lighter afternoon amusements. The moment you enter, a burst of sound greets you. Lute strings plucked too enthusiastically, someone humming off-key, and the soft thump of juggling balls hitting the floor. Again, you sigh internally. This is going to be a lively hour. A mainstream historical fact steps forward, wearing flamboyant sleeves. Medieval courts employed a wide variety of entertainers, jesters, musicians, acrobats, storytellers, dancing animals, even performing priests, sometimes moonlighting in ways the church probably didn't approve. Entertainment wasn't just fun. It was political. A ruler who laughed looked approachable. A ruler who didn't. Well, people talked. Your first performer approaches. A jester with bells stitched into his cap, cheeks painted red, and a grin so wide it borders on alarming. He bows deeply, one leg flung theatrically in the air. The bells tinkle. He begins a short speech filled with exaggerated metaphors and jokes about weather, animals, and nobles who, accidentally, walked into wells last week. You smile politely. It's not hilarious, but humor standards in this era are different. People laughed at things like turnips shaped like faces. One light joke drifts through your thoughts. If you posted half these performances online today, the comments section would either riot or applaud ironically. The jester pulls out a wooden puppet, a tiny king wearing a crown 3 sizes too big. He reenacts a scene of royal justice where the puppet trips over a chicken. The room chuckles. You chuckle too, even though you're beginning to suspect you've become the comedic inspiration. Next comes a troupe of musicians. A harpist plucks a slow, wandering melody that drips through the room like warm honey. A rebec player accompanies with thin, trembling notes that somehow sound like both music and a mosquito. Historians still argue whether medieval musicians actually tuned their instruments properly or if the slightly off-key sound was considered charming. You decide to consider it charming for your own sanity. A dancer enters performing slow, swirling motions with long, trailing sleeves. It's beautiful in its own mysterious way, though you aren't entirely certain what the story is supposed to be. Something about seasons, or a romance, or possibly just extremely interpretive laundry folding. Then comes your favorite, the storyteller. He's an older man with a beard like an overgrown meadow and a voice made of warm gravel. He begins recounting an ancient tale, heroes fighting beasts, maidens speaking in riddles, kings wrestling destiny. The room leans in. So do you. Storytelling in this era is an art form, a living memory, a communal heartbeat. You feel a soft, sleepy comfort settling over you as the images unfold in your mind. A quirky tidbit arrives dressed in feathers. Some medieval courts kept trained animals, monkeys, parrots, even bears to amuse the royals. Today, you're treated to a small dog wearing a miniature cape who trots proudly across the carpet. The jester follows, insisting the dog can count. The dog barks 3 times, then lies down. Everyone claps. You have no idea what just happened, but it's adorable. Halfway through the session, an acrobat tumbles into the room, literally. He flips forward, then backward, then sideways, in ways that make your joints ache just watching. He juggles knives for a moment, poorly, then switches to safer objects. Apples, wooden balls, and once, for reasons unknown, a stuffed fabric frog. You applaud. He beams, like he just won a tournament. Another entertainer arrives with a strange-looking instrument, a hurdy-gurdy. The crank spins, the strings buzz, and the sound that emerges is halfway between music and an enchanted beehive. You try to keep your expression neutral. Nobles lean in, pretending they understand the artistry. In reality, the entire room is united in polite confusion. Historians still argue whether these sessions were truly enjoyable for monarchs or simply obligations disguised as entertainment. You suspect it depends on the monarch. Today, with your heavy outfit, your tired mind, and the lingering taste of roasted mystery birds still in your mouth, this feels like surviving a Renaissance talent show where everyone is both deeply earnest and mildly chaotic. A poet approaches, clutching parchment dramatically. He recites a new work about your greatness, something involving metaphors of suns, rivers, lions, and the noble curvature of destiny's arc. It's flattering. It's confusing. It's very, very long. You nod with solemn appreciation, hoping he's almost done. He is not. You endure gracefully. As the session winds down, the jester returns for one last act. He offers you a carved wooden puzzle, insisting it represents the complexity of ruling the kingdom. You twist it experimentally, and a small panel pops open, revealing a tiny painted chicken. The jester beams proudly. The room laughs warmly. You give a royal nod, the universal gesture for "I don't know what I'm looking at, but I support your enthusiasm." Finally, your steward steps forward, signaling the end of the entertainment hour. Performers bow deeply. You rise slowly, partly due to dignity, partly due to the weight of your outfit, and offer a gracious farewell. You leave the solo with a faint smile, your ears still echoing with lute notes, your eyes full of swirling sleeves and enthusiastic juggling. Court entertainment is odd, earnest, unpredictable, and occasionally delightful. But now it's time to return to something less whimsical and much more tedious: royal duties. You adjust your heavy robe and move toward the next chamber. Your day marches on. You exit the solo with the faint jingling of the jester's bells still clinging to your ears, and the moment the door closes behind you, the whimsical air evaporates. Now comes the part of your royal day that feels less like majesty and more like glorified paperwork. You're guided down another corridor, less drafty this time, but filled with the faint smell of parchment and melted wax. This can only mean one thing. It's time for your afternoon royal duties. You enter the council chamber, where a long wooden table sits buried under scrolls, maps, letters, ledgers, seals, and at least one quill that looks like it's seen the rise and fall of several dynasties. Advisors straighten immediately when you approach, their faces shifting into that expression of forced calm that says, "We need to tell you everything at once, but we're terrified you might sigh." A mainstream historical fact twists itself into your cloak. Monarchs spent much of their day reviewing petitions, signing orders, issuing decrees, approving expenditures, hearing disputes, and stamping documents with seals carved from bone, metal, or precious stone. And unlike the clean digital signatures of today, medieval signing involved wax, fire, and a very real risk of burning your sleeve off. You sit at the table, shifting under the weight of your garments, and one chamberlain slides a parchment toward you. "A land dispute," he says gravely. "Of course it is. It's always a land dispute." You unroll the parchment, trying to decipher handwriting that could politely be described as ambitious squiggles. Two brothers are arguing over a stretch of meadow so small it barely qualifies as real estate. You issue a calm verdict, praying they won't come back tomorrow with an appeal. Next comes a bill for repairing a section of the town wall. Then a request for funds to purchase new crossbow strings for the guards. Then a report about wolves near a village. Then a note from the Queen's cousin complaining about the castle's bread being less fluffy than usual. You resist the urge to write back. This is medieval Europe. Be grateful it's not full of gravel. Your steward hands you a ring of wax seals. Each decree needs your imprint. You heat the wax with a candle flame carefully, because you are wearing enough fabric to start a bonfire and press your signet ring into the soft pool. You repeat this process dozens of times, the repetitive motion almost hypnotic. A quirky tidbit sneaks into the room carrying ink stains. Medieval monarchs often delegated signature duties to trusted scribes who replicated the royal hand, especially when the ruler was ill, tired, or simply uninterested. Some historians still argue whether certain royal documents were truly written by the monarch or by an overworked scribe politely pretending to be them. You briefly consider starting a delegate everything trend, but your advisors are already watching you like hawks. One advisor clears his throat, launching into a long explanation of grain stock calculations. His voice drones like a sleepy bee. You nod occasionally, partly to appear engaged, partly because the rhythm of his words is lulling you into a gentle daydream where you aren't wearing 20 pounds of embroidery. Another advisor approaches with a military map. A neighboring baron is requesting permission to expand his garrison. You study the tiny painted banners and roads, pretending not to notice that the map is wildly inaccurate. Medieval cartography was a creative art form, half geography, half hopeful guesswork. You give your answer diplomatically, hoping it doesn't spark an accidental border conflict. Next comes correspondence. Letters from nobles, merchants, clergy, foreign rulers, and random people who somehow manage to address a scroll directly to the throne. You read greetings overflowing with flattery, complaints dripping with indignation, and pleasantries so long you wonder if the writer was being paid per word. Your chancellor reads a diplomatic letter from a neighboring kingdom, flowery, courteous, and suspiciously vague. Historians still argue whether diplomatic phrasing from this era was intentionally ambiguous or whether everyone simply feared insulting each other into war. You dictate a reply that is equally polite, equally vague, and equally likely to confuse future scholars. Then there's the Treasury report. Numbers, columns, tallies, some neat, others scratched out and rewritten by someone who clearly had a stressful day. You try to focus while your inner thoughts whisper, "I was not crowned to do math." You authorize funding for repairs, deny unnecessary spending, and grimace at the rising cost of spices, which are apparently more valuable than rubies this season. A messenger bursts in breathless, a common occurrence. Something about a merchant arrested for selling enchanted onions. You close your eyes for a moment. You are not emotionally prepared for enchanted onions. You give a ruling anyway. Another attendant arrives with lists of upcoming feasts, ceremonies, diplomatic visits, and seasonal festivals. You approve some, postpone others, and seriously contemplate banning festivals altogether, if only to reduce the paperwork. A light joke flickers through your mind. At this rate, you might be the only monarch in history to pull a muscle signing documents. An advisor unfurls a long scroll detailing repairs needed in several royal estates. Roof leaks, gatehouse damage, mysterious drafts. One castle reportedly has a ghost that refuses to stop rattling chains at night. You wonder if the ghost accepts negotiations, or if medieval paranormal diplomacy is beyond your authority. Hours pass. Your hand is cramped, your back stiff, and your crown feels a fraction heavier. Royal duties may look glamorous in portraits, but in reality, they're closer to a medieval office job with worse lighting and higher stakes. Finally, the steward announces that the day's essential documents are complete. You lean back, allowing yourself one slow, relieved breath. The chamber quiets, the advisors relax. A candle gutters softly against the stone wall. You stand slowly, carefully, and with the slight wobble of someone who has pressed their signet seal at least 50 times. Attendants rush to adjust your cloak, as if even a wrinkle might change the course of diplomacy. Your royal duties are done for now. But your day? Not even close. Something far more secretive, strange, and curious waits deeper within the palace. You head toward the hidden corridors, where royalty ventures not for politics, but for privacy. You leave the council chamber with your mind buzzing from numbers, seals, land disputes, and the haunting memory of someone earnestly reporting enchanted onions. And now, at last, you're headed somewhere quieter, not peaceful, exactly, but hidden. The palace isn't only a place of public ritual, it's also a labyrinth of secrets, shadowed corridors, and tucked-away rooms where royalty can breathe without performing. You walk toward a heavy tapestry draped along the wall. 2 attendants linger nearby, pretending not to notice that you're about to do something mildly rebellious. You lift the edge of the tapestry, revealing a narrow archway behind it, the palace equivalent of a staff-only door in modern buildings, except far more interesting. You slip inside, and the air changes immediately. The passage is dim, lit by a few weak torches flickering like tired fireflies. The ceiling is lower here, and the stone walls bear the marks of centuries of hidden footsteps. These are the secret passages of medieval royalty corridors, meant for privacy, emergency escapes, discreet meetings, or, in some cases, avoiding that one particularly talkative noble. A mainstream historical fact walks beside you. Many medieval palaces and castles were intentionally built with hidden passages. Some connected private chambers, others led to defensive positions, and a few ended in trapdoors or concealed stairways. These weren't just architectural quirks, they were strategic necessities in a world where intrigue, assassination plots, and political ambushes were just another Tuesday. You run your hand along the wall as you move deeper, feeling the cool roughness of ancient stone. The passage twists, turns, narrows, and widens unpredictably. The floor slopes downward. You can smell dust, old wood, and faint traces of beeswax from candles long burned out. One quirky tidbit floats behind you like a mischievous breeze. Some monarchs used these secret spaces not only for safety, but for eavesdropping. It wasn't uncommon for a ruler or a very trusted servant to stand hidden behind a thin wall, listening to nobles discuss loyalty, gossip, or wildly inaccurate political theories. You try not to imagine yourself doing this, but the temptation is real. The passage leads you to a small wooden door barely tall enough for you to duck through. It opens into a private room, a chamber so quiet you can hear your own breathing echo. There's a narrow window overlooking the inner courtyard, a small desk, a chair, a stack of parchments, and a candle burned down to a stub. This is one of your private spaces, a royal refuge where you can exist without ceremony. You sit for a moment, letting your shoulders relax under the weight of your clothing. Outside the window, you see the courtyard bustling with activity, pages running errands, guards shifting positions, a few chickens wandering with the confidence of noblemen. From here, life feels distant, softened, manageable. But privacy in medieval royalty is never absolute. A soft knock sounds at the hidden door. You tense for a moment. Old instincts, old fears inherited from rulers before you who knew the dangers lurking behind power. Historians still argue whether monarchs lived in constant fear of plots or whether they exaggerated the paranoia to justify strict security. Either way, the feeling sticks to your ribs like cold sap. Your steward enters quietly, bowing with an expression that suggests he carries news too delicate for public corridors. He hands you a sealed note, no crest, no emblem, anonymous. The kind of letter that never comes through official channels. You break the seal and read the short message inside. A matter requires your private attention. Midnight. The old tower stair. You exhale slowly. The old tower stair is one of the least used parts of the palace, drafty, echoing, and avoided by servants who insist it's haunted by a knight who can't stop reciting poetry. You aren't thrilled about the midnight appointment, but this is medieval royalty. Cryptic notes are practically part of the job description. For now, though, you set the note aside and leave the room through a different passage, one that curls upward through tight, stone steps. The torchlight flickers, casting long shadows that climb the walls like restless spirits. You emerge behind another hidden panel, this one opening into the royal gallery. Large windows flood the space with afternoon light, illuminating rows of portraits. Your ancestors stare down at you, their eyes painted wide and intense. You walk past them, feeling judged by at least three, and silently supported by one who looks like they never understood the assignment either. Near the far end of the gallery, you find another hidden door cleverly disguised as part of the wainscoting. This one leads to the whispering corridor named not for ghosts, but for its acoustics. A whispered word at one end carries clearly to the other, thanks to the curved stone vault overhead. A light joke rises in your thoughts. This passage is basically the medieval, the version of someone standing in a hallway whispering into a megaphone. As you walk, you hear faint voices from distant rooms carried along the curve, servants discussing dinner preparations, a noble complaining about drafty windows, someone insisting that a cat stole their gloves. It's oddly comforting, like listening to the background hum of a bustling home. The passage ends at another small chamber, a personal retreat filled with cushions, a tapestry depicting a hunt, and a small chest containing private letters. You sit for a moment, letting your spine decompress. The quiet here is warm and thick, like sinking into a still pond. Historians still argue about how much time monarchs spent in private spaces versus public ones. Some insist rulers lived under relentless scrutiny. Others point to architectural evidence suggesting secret rooms were frequently used. You suspect the truth is a mixture of both. Royalty is a performance, but every performer needs a backstage. You rise, again, slipping back through the passage, the walls guiding you like old friends. These spaces hold stories, secrets, footsteps forgotten by time, and as you step out into the brighter main hall once more, you feel a quiet gratitude for these hidden corridors, for the chance to breathe, to think, to exist beyond the throne. You adjust your crown, lift your chin, and prepare to re-enter the visible world of royalty. But somewhere in the back of your mind, the midnight message waits, tickling your nerves like a draft from an unopened window. Your day continues, and tonight, something strange awaits you in the old tower stair. You leave the whispering corridor behind and step back into the broader palace, where sunlight stretches across the flagstones and servants bustle like an organized swarm. But despite the noise and motion, your thoughts drift towards something far less ordinary, the palace menagerie. Because as medieval royalty, you don't just have pets, you have a full roster of exotic creatures whose only real purpose is to impress visitors and confuse everyone else. You make your way toward the outer courtyard, where a series of wooden enclosures and stone pens sit arranged like a medieval version of a very chaotic zoo. The air hums with odd sounds, trills, snorts, hisses, and something that might be a sneeze but could also be an animal demanding attention. A mainstream historical fact trots beside you. Many medieval courts kept menageries filled with rare animals. Lions, leopards, camels, monkeys, bears, peacocks, and creatures that no one fully understood but insisted were magical. These animals were symbols of wealth, power, and divine authority. After all, nothing says beau to me like casually displaying a leopard from a land so far away it sounds made up. You approach the first enclosure, a sturdy wooden pen reinforced with iron bars. Inside lounges a large, shaggy creature with curved horns and an expression that says it's deeply unimpressed by everything. A courtier rushes forward, breathlessly informing you it's an aurochs, even though historians still argue whether the creature on display was truly an aurochs or just an extremely large cow with good marketing. You nod sagely, pretending expertise. A keeper leads you to the next pen, where a pair of peacocks strut dramatically. Their feathers shimmer in blues and greens, catching the sunlight in dazzling displays. The birds shriek suddenly, startling a page who drops an armful of straw. You hide a smile. Some medieval monarchs adored peacocks not for their beauty, but because serving peacock at feasts, with feathers reattached after cooking, was considered the height of elegance. You glance at the birds. They glare back. You decide you won't be eating peacock anytime soon. A few steps away, you encounter a small cage containing a bright green parrot who greets you with a loud, confident squawk. The bird's vocabulary includes 3 phrases in a foreign tongue, one mispronounced blessing, and something the keeper sheepishly insists is not an insult. A quirky tidbit flutters around your memory. Parrots were considered exotic treasures, often gifted between monarchs as diplomatic tokens. Some royals believed these birds brought luck. Others believed they spied on conversations. You study the parrot studies you. You both blink at the same time. Suspicious. Further along, you approach an enclosure guarded by 2 nervous men holding long poles. Inside, pacing with calculated grace, is a big cat. Stripes, golden eyes, a tail swishing with attitude. A tiger, the keeper whispers reverently, even though the animal might also be a leopard, or perhaps just a very confused lynx. Medieval animal identification was often a chaotic guessing game, and historians still argue whether descriptions from this era were wildly inaccurate or charmingly imaginative. The creature growls softly, a low, rumbling sound that vibrates through your bones. You take a respectful step back. Medieval royalty enjoyed having exotic animals, but actually interacting with them safely? That was a more complicated question. One light joke sparks in your mind. Somewhere in the kingdom, there's probably a monk who believes this is just a very large, morally ambiguous house cat. Your next stop is the strangest. A long, narrow enclosure filled with bundles of reeds. A keeper proudly gestures toward the creature inside a thin, scaled, slightly irritable reptile stretching lazily across a rock. A dragon lizard, he announces confidently, as though unveiling a miracle. You lean in. It's definitely a crocodile or alligator, but to medieval eyes, anything with scales and teeth was either a dragon, a demon, or someone's extremely unlucky spirit guide. You move on, guided to a tall structure built like an oversized birdhouse. Inside, a pair of cranes stand elegantly on impossibly thin legs. They tilt their heads, inspecting, to you with beady eyes. Cranes were symbols of vigilance and longevity. Some monarchs believed keeping them nearby helped protect the realm. These cranes, however, merely look mildly offended by your presence. The final enclosure brings you face to face with the most unpredictable creature of all. A bear. A large brown beast, shaggy-furred and half asleep in the sunlight. Its ears twitch when it hears your footsteps. The keeper assures you it's gentle. You nod. knowing full well that medieval definitions of gentle were flexible at best. Still, you stand for a moment watching the creature breathe, its presence oddly grounding. Historians still argue whether medieval menageries were well cared for or poorly managed. Accounts vary. Some rulers treasured their animals, feeding them delicacies and housing them in ornate enclosures. Others treated them as spectacles for tournaments or terrible lion-baiting games. Your own menagerie seems well-intentioned, if slightly confused. As you wander past the final cage, a servant hurries over holding a scroll. The message simply says, "Feeding's delayed. The monkey escaped again." You close your eyes and exhale. Somewhere in this palace, a small, chaotic creature is probably climbing tapestries and stealing jewelry. You take one last look at the animals. The peacocks preen. The parrot mutters something suspicious. The bear yawns magnificently. And the tiger, leopard, lynx thing watches you with regal indifference. These creatures are more than pets. They are symbols, conversation pieces, living badges of wealth and wonder. Yet strangely, they also make you feel less alone, proof that life in this stone palace is bigger, stranger, and wilder than the endless rituals of court. You turn away from the menagerie and start toward the inner yard. Another part of your afternoon awaits. Training and martial practice, because even a monarch draped in jewels is expected to know how to swing a blade. Your day moves forward, paw prints and feathers left behind. You leave the menagerie behind, peacocks shrieking, parrot muttering, tiger, leopard, lynx thing, judging your life choices, and step into the central courtyard, where the afternoon sun glows like warm metal on the stones. This part of the day is less delicate, less ceremonial, and far more vigorous. Because despite your jeweled cloak, your heavy crown, and your distinct desire for a nap, you're expected to train for war. After all, you're a medieval monarch, symbol of power, defender of the realm, person who definitely should know how to hold a sword without looking like you're auditioning for an interpretive dance. Your attendants usher you toward the training yard, a cramped space enclosed by high stone walls, where echoes bounce around like overly excited birds. The air smells faintly of dust, sweat, and hay. A few guards stand ready, their armor gleaming, their faces politely neutral. They all bow as you approach, though one looks like he's trying very hard not to laugh at your outfit. A mainstream historical fact tightens your belt for you. Medieval royalty were expected to train in martial skills, swordsmanship, horsemanship, archery, lance handling, even wrestling. Some monarchs trained daily. Others pretended to train while their instructors politely said nothing. Regardless, martial competence was part of royal identity, even if your clothing today makes you feel more like a walking drapery display than a warrior. Your master-at-arms steps forward. He's sturdy, scarred, and built like someone who can bench press a small ox. He bows lightly. "Your Majesty," he says, handing you a wooden practice sword. Because the last time someone let a royal train with a real blade indoors, a tapestry worth a fortune met an untimely end. You grip the practice sword. It feels good, solid, balanced, and less likely to kill you than the real thing. You roll your shoulders, feeling the weight of your clothing shift awkwardly. Your master-at-arms eyes the layers of embroidered fabric and sighs quietly. "We'll keep movements simple today," he decides diplomatically. You take your stance, or at least you try to. Your cloak tangles around your ankles like a clingy cat. You attempt to adjust. Your crown tilts forward. A guard coughs into his gauntlet, possibly to hide a laugh. You exhale calmly, reminding yourself that medieval monarchs don't get embarrassed, they get character development. Your instructor demonstrates the first sequence. Step, block, swing. You imitate it. Step, block, swing. Your sleeve flares so dramatically it could start its own dance troupe. Your swing is decent though, and your instructor nods approval. A quirky tidbit slams into your thoughts like a wooden shield. Some medieval monarchs insisted on training while wearing their full ceremonial clothing to display readiness. Others trained in far simpler outfits to avoid sweating onto expensive embroidery. You are clearly in the first category. Today, willingly or not, the guards form a loose circle, watching your practice with polite interest. One offers you a wooden shield decorated with painted lions. You strap it on, feeling strangely heroic despite the fact that your sleeve keeps slipping under the strap like it's trying to escape battle. You step forward for another drill. Block, step, swing. The wooden sword thuds against your instructor's shield with a satisfying sound. You do it again and again. With each repetition, your movements grow smoother, your breath steadies, your arms remember strength. Beneath the regalia, beneath the rituals, beneath the royal expectations, you are still someone capable of the physical world. But just as you find your rhythm, something small and chaotic streaks across the yard. A guard yelps. Your instructor freezes. You lower your sword in confusion. Then you see it. The escaped monkey from earlier, scampering across the stones while clutching what appears to be someone's glove and a stolen pastry. You watch it climb a cart, leap onto a barrel, and vanish into a hayloft. One light joke flickers through your mind. Royal training is dangerous, but palace wildlife is statistically much more chaotic. Your instructor clears his throat with dignity. Again, Your Majesty. You resume the sequence, pushing the absurdity aside. Block, step, swing. Sweat gathers beneath your collar. Your heavy garments cling like overbearing relatives. Your breath grows warm and steady. Next comes the archery portion. A bow is placed in your hands, a beautiful, polished piece of yew. The string hums softly as you pull it back, your fingers trembling slightly from the strain. The target stands several paces away, painted with circles that shimmer faintly in the afternoon light. You take aim. Historians still argue whether medieval rulers were truly skilled archers, or whether their instructors simply wrote flattering accounts. You inhale, exhale, and release. The arrow sails through the air, straight, clean, and lands dead center on the outer ring. Not a bullseye, but respectable. The guards murmur approval. You pretend this is exactly what you meant to do. You try again. Another arrow flies. This one lands closer. You feel a small burst of confidence warming your chest. But then, as you reach for a third arrow, your sleeve catches on the bowstring. You nearly snap the bow in half. Your crown tilts dramatically forward again, and one guard laughs so loudly he nearly swallows his tongue. You straighten your crown with regal calmness, while silently accepting that fashion and archery were never meant to coexist. Finally, your instructor brings out a wooden pole for light staff practice. You twirl it once, feeling the balance. The motion actually looks impressive until your cloak tangles again, forcing you into a half-spin that looks more interpretive dance than martial prowess. You quickly recover, trying to look fierce, but your instructor's raised eyebrow ruins the effect. Despite the awkward clothes, the tangled movements, the escaped monkey, and the faint suspicion that your ancestors are laughing from their portraits, you continue. Strike, parry, step, turn, sweat beads at your temples, your muscles warm, your mind steadies. This is the rare part of royal life where you feel real, your body, your effort, your movement. No ceremony, no bowing courtiers, just exertion, focus, and the quiet hum of physical challenge. After a final sequence, your instructor bows. Enough for today, Your Majesty. You lower the staff, exhaling deeply. The guards applaud lightly, respectfully, but also with the subtle relief of men who survived a session without accidentally injuring royalty. You hand back the wooden weapons, wipe your brow with a cloth someone instantly presents, and straighten your garments as much as physics will allow. The training yard quiets behind you as you step away. Your muscles ache pleasantly, your mind feels clearer, and your clothing, well, it feels heavier than ever. But you're ready to continue. And just beyond the courtyard, another chamber waits, one filled with physicians, herbs, odd remedies, and a surprising number of sharp objects. Because medieval royalty didn't just train for war, they also worried about everything that might kill them before the next feast. You leave the training yard with your muscles pleasantly aching and your cloak considerably less cooperative than before. The sun has dipped slightly, softening the courtyard into a golden haze. You inhale deeply, savoring the brief sense of accomplishment before remembering what comes next. The part of your day that is somehow both fascinating and mildly terrifying, meeting with the royal physicians, because medieval royalty may live in stone fortresses, dine under chandeliers, and wear enough jewels to blind an approaching army, but when it comes to health, everyone is one sneeze away from a full-blown panic. You're escorted into the physician's chamber, a room that smells like a suspicious mix of lavender, vinegar, beeswax, and distant fear. Shelves line the walls, packed with jars containing herbs, powders, dried roots, and objects you decide not to examine too closely. A large table is cluttered with bowls, mortars, quills, manuscripts, and at least one instrument that resembles a torture device wearing the disguise of medical innovation. Your royal physician rises at once. He's dressed in a dark robe, hair slightly wild, eyes alert with the intensity of a man who hasn't slept since last winter. He bows and gestures for you to sit on a cushioned stool, one of the few pieces of furniture in the palace designed for comfort instead of intimidation. A mainstream historical fact sits down beside you. Medieval medicine relied heavily on the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health was believed to depend on balancing these humours, which basically means the royal physician is about to diagnose you based on your complexion, mood, and how warm your hands feel. Modern science would weep, but medieval physicians, they thrived on it. He studies your face intensely, humming softly. "A bit flushed," he murmurs. "Perhaps an excess of blood." You resist the urge to tell him you were just swinging a wooden sword for an hour. Instead, you nod with regal patience. The physician raises your hand, turning it toward the light, squinting as though your palm contains ancient prophecies. Before you can protest, a second physician, your apothecary, steps forward holding a bowl of herbs. He insists you inhale deeply. The scent is strong, sharp, and vaguely reminiscent of a forest trying to apologize. You breathe in, cough lightly, and try not to make a face. A quirky tidbit enters the room wearing a small leather pouch. Some medieval rulers wore amulets filled with herbs or crushed gemstones to protect against illness. Today, your apothecary proudly presents one such charm, a tiny satchel stuffed with rosemary, mint, and something he refuses to identify. He ties it to your belt with the solemnity of a knight bestowing knighthood. Now you smell like a well-seasoned feast. Your physician now takes out a long, thin tool and begins checking your throat. The metal is cold. You flinch slightly. He nods, satisfied. "Clear," he says calmly, before adding, "but avoid cold winds." And overthinking. Both can corrupt the humours. You silently vow to avoid both, though only one seems realistically achievable. The next part of the examination involves checking your pulse. He counts under his breath, nods rhythmically, then announces grandly that your internal winds seem cooperative today. You decide this is good news. Then he steps back and gestures to a table where several glass containers sit. One holds leeches, actual leeches. They squirm slowly in murky water, unaware that their entire career revolves around mildly alarming royalty. Historians still argue whether bloodletting truly helped patients or simply made them very tired and vaguely anemic. Today, thankfully, your physician decides you don't need bleeding. "Not this week," he announces, as if it's something he schedules like gardening. Relief washes over you. But relief is temporary because he immediately pulls out a small satchel of dried herbs. "For strengthening the humours," he says. He pours a pinch into a copper cup, adds warm water, and stirs. The resulting liquid looks like tea but smells like the wrong end of a compost heap. You drink anyway, slowly, courageously, regrettably. The concoction tastes like bitter dirt mixed with sincerity. You hand back the cup with a polite smile that says, "Thank you. I hate it." Another bowl is placed before you, this one containing small candies made of honey and herbs. "For digestion," the apothecary explains. You take one. It's surprisingly pleasant, a tiny pleasantry, apology from the universe for everything else. As the physicians confer about your general condition, you notice one assistant writing notes furiously, documenting your complexion, your breathing, your mood, and possibly the arrangement of your cloak. Medieval medical records are part health log, part observational poetry. Another attendant enters and whispers something to the physician. He turns to you gravely. "Your Majesty, I must advise caution." A chill has been passing through the servants' quarters. His brow creases dramatically. You must avoid drafts. You think of the palace corridors, with their icy winds sweeping through stone cracks like enthusiastic ghosts. Avoid drafts? You might as well try avoiding oxygen. Still, you nod solemnly. A light joke dances through your thoughts. If you followed every medieval medical warning, you'd never leave bed, never eat, never breathe deeply, and never experience joy. Finally, the examination concludes. The physician places a small bundle of dried herbs in your hands. "Burn these for purification," he says, "and rest when you can." The phrase, "when you can," is almost funny, considering your schedule today has been the opposite of restful. You rise, bowing your head in thanks. The physicians bow deeply in return, relieved that you're leaving without fainting, bleeding, or spontaneously combusting. As you walk out, the scent of herbs clings to your garments. Your stomach still holds traces of bitter tea. Your belt now carries a charm pouch that keeps brushing against your hip, like a tiny, fragrant reminder of your fragile humors. But beyond the physician's chamber, another part of royal life awaits, less medical, more psychological. Because in this palace, illness is not the only thing that threatens stability. Whispers do too, and the court is full of them. You leave the physician's chamber smelling like a mobile herb garden and feeling only mildly traumatized by the tea that tasted like regret. Your steps echo down the corridor, slower now, more thoughtful, because as much as your body must be tended, so must your reputation, and nothing in a medieval palace shapes reputation faster than gossip. Court gossip isn't casual murmuring. It's a weapon, a currency, a wildfire that moves between stone walls with the enthusiasm of a bored jester. And as you step into the tapestry-lined gallery, you feel it immediately like a hum in the air, an invisible current of whispers weaving through every corner. You move forward, cloak swaying softly, and catch the first faint strand of conversation drifting from behind a column. Two ladies in waiting whisper urgently about who sat too close to whom at yesterday's feast. The accusation sounds dramatic, but you know better. In a world where seating arrangements can start political feuds, too close is a serious offense. A mainstream historical fact strolls alongside you. Medieval courts were epicenters of rumor. With limited entertainment, dense social hierarchies, and constant political maneuvering, gossip became both survival tool and social sport. A misplaced compliment could spark suspicion. Even a sneeze might lead to speculation about curses. You continue walking, remembering to keep your face neutral, because even your facial expressions can and will be interpreted. Near the window alcove, two minor nobles snap to attention when they spot you approaching. They bow so quickly you fear one might topple over. Moments before noticing you, they were whispering loudly enough for the stone wall to blush. Your arrival silences them, but you can feel their curiosity crawling over you like an invisible cloak. You step past them, pretending not to notice. A courtier hurries toward you with the urgency of a man who believes he carries news vital to the kingdom's stability. "Your Majesty," he whispers dramatically, leaning in far too close, "there are rumors the Earl of Greyford has been seen slipping into the West Tower after dark." You blink slowly. Of course he has. The West Tower has the only decent view of the sunset. But rather than saying this aloud, you respond with a perfectly ambiguous, "I see." This answer is neither approval nor alarm, just enough to let the rumor burn without fanning the flames. A quirky tidbit flits into your mind. Medieval courts sometimes hired gossip recorders, people whose actual job was to relay rumors to the monarch. A medieval newsfeed, delivered by trembling courtiers instead of glowing screens. You wonder how many things you've heard today fall into that category. You continue down the corridor, and a faint echo of voices follows you. Two servants whisper about the escaped monkey, convinced it's an omen. Another group debates whether the foreign ambassador purposely wore a hat shaped like that. Historians still argue whether medieval fashion choices had political significance, or if some people simply enjoyed experimentation. A steward tries to catch your attention with an update about grain storage, but he is interrupted by a noblewoman sweeping past dramatically, exclaiming to her companion, "Well, I heard the Queen's astrologer predicted tension in the stars." She glances at you, eyes widening, realizing she might have said too much. You nod politely. She nearly faints with relief. Then comes the dangerous kind of gossip, a whisper too sharp, too quick. Near the entrance to the chapel, two nobles murmur about a possible alliance forming behind your back. You catch only fragments: banquets, marriage, inheritance, uncertain loyalty. The kind of talk that isn't just social fodder, it's political dynamite. You pause by a carved pillar, pretending to admire the woodwork. Your ear tilts just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to gather information. Their words weave together like tangled threads. You pick out what matters, what threatens, what doesn't. And then you step away, because being caught listening is worse than being uninformed. A light joke sparkles in your thoughts. If medieval rulers had a rumor muting button, half the kingdom would lose their favorite hobby. You reach the end of the corridor, where a scribe waits with a parchment listing notable court conversations. You scan it quickly. Half the rumors are nonsense. Someone claims they saw a ghost carrying a candle. Someone else insists a comet was shaped like your face. But a few lines stand out. Reports of tension between nobles, jealousy among courtiers, a whisper of foreign intrigue. Rumors, yes, but rumors that must be managed. You hand the parchment back, head held high. The court watches your every movement, every footstep, every blink, and they'll discuss all of it by dinner. Historians still argue whether medieval monarchs actually controlled the flow of gossip or simply pretended to. But you know the truth. Controlling gossip is impossible. Navigating it, surviving it, steering it, just enough to keep the peace, that's the real skill. As you step away from the gallery, you take a steady breath. Your mind feels heavier than your garments, but you've survived another round of whispers. And now, as the sun tilts lower, the palace bells begin to call you toward another ancient, ever-present ritual, the constant devotion and religious ceremony that defines royal legitimacy. Because in the medieval world, gossip may shape politics, but faith shapes everything else. You move from the echoing corridors of gossip toward the quiet, resina-scented heart of the palace. As you walk, the tone of everything shifts. The whispers fade, footsteps soften, the air thickens with candle smoke, and the faint, sweet smell of incense. Because in medieval royalty, your day isn't complete, not even close, without an entire series of religious rituals woven between every breath you take. Being a monarch means being watched by humans and heaven, or at least by the people who insist heaven is watching. You step through a carved wooden doorway into the palace chapel. Sunlight pours through stained glass windows, scattering shards of ruby and sapphire light across the cold stone floor. The effect is dramatic enough to make even a modest prayer feel like it should come with orchestral accompaniment. A mainstream historical fact kneels beside you. Religion permeated royal life. Monarchs weren't just rulers, they were divinely sanctioned leaders, whose authority depended heavily on maintaining spiritual credibility. That meant daily prayers, regular masses, endless ritual observances, and frequent visits to relics believed to guard the fate of the kingdom. A priest approaches quietly. He bows, hands clasped, every movement practiced and gentle. "Your Majesty," he murmurs, "the afternoon devotions await." Of course they do. Devotions always await. You try to smile politely, though inwardly you feel like you've already completed 3 spiritual marathons today. You kneel in the cushioned stool reserved for you. The cushion is thin, medieval royalty may get jewels and feasts, but comfortable seating apparently wasn't part of the divine plan. The priest begins to chant in a low, rhythmic tone. The sound vibrates through the wooden pew, through your sleeves, through your bones. It's calming, but also long. Very long. Candles flicker. Incense rises in curling ribbons, and your mind drifts. You remember a quirky tidbit. Some monarchs kept personal relic collections, tiny pieces of bone, cloth, or wood, believed to be from saints. These relics traveled everywhere with them, sometimes in ornate lockets worn under clothing. Your own relic chest rests just beside the altar. Inside, wrapped in silk, lies a fragment of something pilgrims swear is miraculous. Whether it truly is, or someone 3 generations ago had an overly imaginative merchant, well, historians still argue that point. The priest finishes a prayer and motions for you to approach the altar. You stand carefully, adjusting your heavy garments so they don't trip you during this very sacred, very public moment. You kiss a polished silver cross. You bow before a relic displayed in crystal. You accept a light sprinkle of holy water that lands directly on your forehead and immediately drips down your nose. You pretend this is dignified. As you step back, a group of monks from the nearby abbey enters the chapel. They chant in perfect harmony, deep rolling notes that wash over the hall like dark velvet. Even you feel your shoulders loosen. Monastic music has that effect. One monk coughs in the middle of a verse, ruining the moment slightly. Another glares at him. You pretend not to notice. You move on to the reliquary chamber, one of the most sacred spaces in the palace. The room is dim, illuminated by oil lamps flickering behind carved latticework. Shelves hold bejeweled boxes, gilded caskets, and carved bone cases. Each one labeled, each one containing something believed to hold supernatural protection. Hair from a saint, a shard of a pilgrim's staff, a scrap of cloth touched to a holy altar. A priest hands you one such relic. Today's is a small piece of embroidered fabric said to have belonged to a martyr. You hold it reverently, though part of you wonders if medieval relic authentication was as rigorous as people claimed. Historians still debate the accuracy of half these objects, leaning somewhere between deeply symbolic and a very impressive medieval marketing strategy. Still, the weight of the moment settles on you. Real or not, These objects matter to your people. They matter to your advisors. They matter to your legitimacy. And in this era, symbolism often holds more power than swords. After the relic viewing, you're guided to a side chamber for private confession. The confessor bows deeply and closes the heavy, wooden screen between you. His voice is soft, almost soothing. You list your small failings, impatience, doubt, maybe the uncharitable thought you had about the parrot earlier. He listens, absolves, and offers guidance involving humility, gratitude, and avoiding distractions. You refrain from mentioning the escaped monkey, which feels like a spiritual distraction if there ever was one. When the confession ends, the priest prays over you, asking for divine guidance in ruling wisely, with justice and compassion. You bow your head, appreciating the gravity of his words, even if you'd prefer divine guidance on how to keep your robe from falling off every time you try to move quickly. You rise, and the priest blesses you with a small ritual involving a sprig of rosemary dipped in holy water. The fragrance clings to your garments, blending with the dozen other scents now following you like loyal perfumes. As you step out of the chapel, the late afternoon sun is warmer, gentler. You feel lighter. Not because your burdens are gone, but because the rituals remind you that ruling isn't just paperwork and politics. It's legacy, identity, divine expectation. A group of servants bow as you pass. One whispers in awe, "His Majesty shines today." You assume this refers to your spiritual glow. Realistically, it's probably the sunlight bouncing off the gems on your sleeves. But you take the compliment. And now, with prayers complete and incense still lingering in your lungs, the next part of your royal evening awaits. Feasting, indulgence, strange entertainment, and a dinner table where every bite carries meaning. The palace hums, preparing for night. You feel the shift. You lift your chin. Your day continues. You step out of the chapel with incense still clinging to your sleeves and a faint echo of chanting humming somewhere in the back of your mind. The palace around you has shifted again. Afternoon light has melted into early evening, and servants now move with a different energy, faster, brighter, buzzing like bees preparing the hive for a royal feast. Because it's time for the evening meal. And for medieval royalty, dinner isn't just dinner. It's a production. You're guided through a side corridor as the great hall ahead prepares itself for its nightly transformation. You can already hear the faint clatter of dishes, the testing plucks of musical strings, the hurried whispers of stewards coordinating the choreography of servants. By the time you enter, the place glows like a living painting. Torches flicker along the walls. Chandeliers sway gently overhead. The long wooden tables sparkle with polished pewter, ceramic platters, embroidered linens, and enough candles to light a small village. A mainstream historical fact sits itself down at the high table beside you. Medieval evening feasts were the most important social event of the day. They blended politics, diplomacy, entertainment, ritual, and a surprising amount of noise. Every seat placement meant something. Every dish carried symbolism. Every gesture could shape alliances or shatter them. As you take your place at your raised platform again, the entire hall rises to acknowledge you. It's dramatic, but you've grown used to it. Royalty in this era can't even eat stew without performing gravity. You signal for the feast to begin. The first course arrives quickly. Trencher's thick slabs of stale bread used as both plates and edible tableware. They smell warm and slightly toasty, a dependable comfort in a world filled with unpredictable stews. Servants pour wine into your goblet. The liquid gleams ruby red, swirling in the candlelight, like something out of an illuminated manuscript. The next, a dish appears. Roasted boar, glazed with honey. Its skin glistens, its tusks polished. It is undeniably dramatic. A courtier announces its arrival, as though introducing a knight in a tournament. You take a slice, savoring the mixture of sweet and rich flavors. Half the hall watches you chew, because apparently your opinion on boar is a matter of state. A quirky tidbit waddles into view in the form of a small pastry shaped like a hedgehog. It's decorated with almond slivers for spines. This is a favorite of medieval cooks, dishes shaped like animals, real or mythical. Once, your predecessors were served a pie with tiny live birds inside. Tonight's hedgehog pastry is much safer, though still visually confusing. As you continue eating, the hall erupts into life. A group of musicians strikes up a lively tune performed on lutes, shawms, and small drums. The sound is bright, festive, and only occasionally off-key. Historians still argue whether medieval musicians intentionally played with such enthusiastic unpredictability, or if tuning simply wasn't a cultural priority. Servants glide up and down the hall, bringing dishes ranging from familiar comfort foods to experimental creations. You sample a spicy meat stew, a platter of tiny sugared plums, a bowl of steaming broth flecked with herbs, and a pie whose filling you decide not to identify. One light joke passes through your mind. Medieval food often tastes wonderful, but its confidence in its own mystery is unmatched. Then comes the ceremonial presentation of the Lord's favorite dish, a political necessity disguised as hospitality. Tonight, it's a large platter of freshwater fish, decorated with sprigs of dill and arranged in a spiral pattern for aesthetic intimidation. You take a tasteful bite, offering the steward a gracious nod. He beams like he personally caught the fish using divine intervention. Entertainment begins in earnest now. A troupe of dancers steps forward, moving gracefully in, swirling formations. Their long sleeves trail behind them like painted ribbons. The audience claps in soft rhythm. Then a storyteller approaches, launching into a tale involving heroic kings, stormy seas, enchanted forests, and a goose that may have been a metaphor for inner peace. His voice ripples through the hall like warm smoke, soothing and mesmerizing. Even you feel your eyelids soften. But just as the room settles into comfort, a jester leaps into the center of the hall juggling flaming torches. He spins, laughs, cartwheels, and nearly sets someone's hat on fire. The court gasps. You sigh internally. Fire entertainment indoors is always a questionable idea. Another musician joins him, playing a drum with energetic enthusiasm. The hall's atmosphere shifts again, this time brighter, louder, wilder. People raise their cups, servants refill goblets, nobles lean in to whisper secrets. The room becomes a swirl of flavors, voices, colors, and smells. Somewhere to your left, too, minor nobles argue about whether the comet seen last week predicted prosperity or disaster. To your right, a knight loudly proclaims he could wrestle a bear, if properly motivated. Across the hall, someone sneezes dramatically, and a lady crosses herself in case it was an omen. The feast continues for what feels like hours, though it might only be one. Medieval time is fluid like that. The final course is dessert. Wafers, candied fruit, spiced wine, and a small bowl of something sweet and sticky. You savor the sweetness slowly. By now your stomach is full, your mind pleasantly foggy, and your crown slightly heavier from the warmth of the hall. A subtle shift signals the feast's close. Music softens, candles burn lower, servants begin clearing the trenchers. You rise slowly. The hall rises with you, bowing deeply as the flickering light paints your silhouette across stone walls. You leave the great hall feeling heavier physically and symbolically. Evening is fully here now. The sky outside dark, the palace quieting. But your day is not done. Not yet, because now comes the nighttime wandering the quiet, eerie hours when the palace reveals its darker soul, its creaks, its shadows, its secrets. And you will walk through all of it before sleep claims you. You step out of the great hall with a full stomach, warm cheeks, and the lingering echo of music still humming in your ears. The palace, so loud, so bright only minutes ago, begins to drift into its nighttime state. Voices soften. Footsteps echo differently. The air cools and carries a faint mix of extinguished candles, distant kitchens, and damp stone. Night transforms the castle, and now, wrapped in your heavy garments, you begin your slow wander through its dim-lit veins. Torches flicker along the walls, their flames stretching long shadows that move like creatures with intentions of their own. You start down the corridor, your footsteps tapping steadily against the polished floors. The hall feels emptier now, though you know the palace never truly sleeps, not with guards patrolling, servants cleaning, and courtiers whispering in corners. A mainstream historical fact drifts beside you like a candle flame. Medieval castles were active at night. Guards changed shifts, kitchen staff prepared dough for morning bread, watchmen patrolled battlements, and royalty often wandered or worked after hours because privacy was rare, and the stillness offered a kind of freedom they never got in daylight. You walk slowly, savoring the rare hush. The tapestry-lined walls appear darker now, their woven hunts and battles softened by shadow. The eyes of embroidered animals seem to follow you. You pretend not to notice. It's easier that way. A faint draft touches your neck. Where does it come from? No one knows. Medieval drafts are more mysterious than half the relics in the chapel. You pull your cloak tighter. You pass a row of windows overlooking the courtyard. Moonlight spills onto the crassed stones like pale silver. Far below, a lone guard makes his rounds, his torch bobbing gently. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl hoots, soft, distant, strangely comforting. As you continue down the hallway, you hear footsteps behind you. You turn slightly, your guards, of course. They follow at a respectful distance, trained to remain silent unless danger approaches. You sense their presence more than you see them. Their armor clinks softly whenever someone shifts weight. You pass into another wing, darker, with fewer torches. This is the old part of the palace, colder, draftier, and full of stories. A place where architects from a century ago left odd alcoves, uneven floors, and doorways that seem to lead nowhere at all. Historians still argue whether these awkward architectural choices were intentional defenses or simply the result of builders improvising after running out of funds, materials, or patience. Your footsteps sound louder here. The walls seem to breathe, with you contracting slightly as the night chill settles in. You trace your hand along the stone. It feels ancient, solid, cold enough to sting. Something rustles behind a nearby pillar. You freeze not out of fear, but out of the instinct that comes from living in a massive stone maze with questionable lighting. Your guard steps forward, glances around, and then relaxes. A cat. A palace cat. Likely one of many. It blinks at you with that regal indifference only cats and royalty can pull off. You bow your head to it, because respect goes both ways. The cat promptly ignores you. You continue deeper into the quiet. A quirky tidbit trots into your thoughts. Many medieval castles had nighttime superstitions. Servants avoided certain hallways believed to be haunted. Nobles whispered about spirits drifting through empty chambers. Some even believed that the architecture itself remembered events holding echoes of battles, feasts, and secrets. Whether ghosts are real or not, the palace certainly likes to pretend they are. Tonight, the shadows play tricks on your vision. Tapestries ripple slightly. Floorboards creak in distant rooms. A soft whisper of wind curls around your ears. You reach the central staircase, wide, grand, and dramatically lit by a cluster of torches. You descend slowly, each footstep amplified by the emptiness around you. Halfway down, you pause to look at a massive stained glass window depicting a saint surrounded by symbols. Moonlight filters through it, throwing colored shapes across the stone steps. It's beautiful, strange, dreamlike. At the bottom of the steps, you turn toward the armory passage. The corridor here narrows into a long spine of stone lined with armor stands. Metal glints faintly in the torchlight. The helmets stare blankly ahead, eerie and expressionless. You walk past slowly, resisting the urge to look over your shoulder. Just as you reach the end of the passage, something thuds overhead. You jump, then compose yourself. A guard explains quietly. Likely a servant moving crates, Your Majesty. You nod. Probably true. Mostly true. Hopefully true. You enter the inner courtyard again. The night sky stretches above you, crisp and full of stars. The air smells of wet earth and cooling stone. The world feels suspended, caught somewhere between reality and dream. You walk beneath the covered walkway, your fingers brushing carved wooden beams overhead. Your guards keep pace with you silently, their torches casting amber halos on the cobblestones. For a moment, you feel almost peaceful. But then you remember the message from earlier. Midnight, the old tower stair. You glance toward the looming silhouette of the tower. Its windows sit dark, its stones steeped in shadow. The place is ancient, older than the rest of the palace, full of drafts and creaking timbers and the kind of silence that feels too aware. You aren't heading there just yet, but the thought lingers waiting for you. You complete the circuit of the nighttime palace, taking in its hidden corners, its sleeping chambers, its worn floor stones that have felt centuries of footsteps. This is your world, ancient, echoing, heavy with stories, alive in ways you sometimes understand and sometimes don't. And now, as the hour deepens and the corridors darken, your day inches toward its final ritual, returning to the royal bedchamber, a space that holds its own shadows, its own rumors, its own delicate rituals. You turn toward it now, the palace settling around you like a chill cloak. Your day continues into darkness. You leave the shadowed courtyard as the night deepens into something softer, darker, and strangely intimate. The palace has quieted into its late evening rhythm, an hour when servants move like ghosts, guards speak only in murmurs, and the building itself seems to breathe with slow, ancient lungs. The torches along the halls burn lower now, their flames swaying lazily, casting wandering shapes across your path as you make your way toward your bedchamber. Your shoulders ache faintly from the weight of your garments. Your feet are tired beneath layers of embroidered fabric, and all you want is the sweet simplicity of lying down. But medieval royalty does not simply go to bed. No royalty retires in a choreographed ritual layered with superstition, symbolism, and an uncomfortable number of witnesses. Your bedchamber sits in one of the inner towers, away from the coldest winds. The carved wooden door, thick, heavy, etched with patterns that look almost like vines, opens inward as guards step aside. Warm candlelight spills across the floor as you enter. Inside, the chamber is spacious but not cozy in the modern sense. Stone walls, thick tapestries, a massive bed raised on a wooden platform, draped with heavy curtains embroidered with your family's crest. It looks grand, powerful, important. It also looks like it weighs more than your entire sense of well-being. A mainstream historical fact greets you here. Medieval royal bedchambers weren't private. Not truly. Most monarchs slept surrounded not only by layers of curtains, but by attendants in adjacent rooms, or even on pallets at the foot of the bed to guard against assassins, fires, or bad dreams considered prophetic. Privacy, as you understand it, simply does not exist. Your attendants bustle in behind you. They carry candles, linens, a small brazier of glowing coals, and a tray of evening comforts, warm wine spiced with cloves, a wedge of soft cheese, and a tiny loaf of sweetened bread. The scents wrap gently around you. Beeswax, cinnamon, warm wool, fading incense. You feel yourself begin to unwind. A servant draws your bed, curtains aside to air them. Another fluffs the straw and feather mattress with vigorous enthusiasm. A third pokes the brazier attentively, ensuring the room stays warm enough to prevent drafts but cool enough not to invite illness. Medieval temperature control is a delicate and nerve-wracking art. Historians still argue whether royalty actually rested better because of these attendants, or whether the constant observation made sleep elusive. You lean toward the latter, especially as one attendant stands quietly with a candle positioned just so, illuminating the bed like a sacred relic. Your evening garments must now be changed. The ritual begins. Two attendants carefully unfasten your cloak, folding it with precision that suggests they're performing a prayer. Your belt is removed. Your heavy overrobe follows, leaving you feeling oddly weightless, as though you've dropped a small anvil disguised as fashion. They help you into your nightshirt, which is long, soft, and absolutely enormous. Medieval sleepwear has the charisma of a ghost costume, but the comfort is unmatched. A quirky tidbit joins the room. Some monarchs believed certain fabrics or colors could protect them from nightmares or evil spirits. Tonight, your linens include a thin ribbon of embroidered symbols meant to guard your dreams. One attendant whispers a small blessing while straightening the blanket. You pretended not to hear it, but the comfort is real. The physician's charm pouch still tied to your belt from earlier is now placed beneath your pillow. More superstition, more ritual, more reassurance. You approach the bed. It's tall, very tall. You consider the climb for a moment. Your attendants hover, ready to assist if gravity decides to ambush you. You grip the carved bedpost and lift yourself onto the mattress with dignified confidence. Only a slight wobble, only one attendant pretending not to gasp. The mattress welcomes you with a soft whump. The blankets fall around your legs, warm and heavy. The curtains are drawn slightly but not fully. Enough for airflow, but not enough for vulnerability. Everything has rules. A guard takes his place near the far wall, where he'll remain all night. Another sits outside the chamber door, listening for danger or mischief. A third walks the hallway, counting steps like a human metronome. Your attendants retreat slowly, blowing out candles one by one. The shadows deepen, soften, merge. The final servant bows, whispers a goodnight blessing, and closes the outer door with a quiet click. Now it's you, the faint crackle of the brazier, the whisper of curtains shifting as warm air moves through the room, and the ancient castle settling into its nocturnal symphony. You lie there, breathing deeply, feeling the day's weight drain from your muscles. The night is calm, almost peaceful. But then your eyes drift to the corner of the chamber, the one nearest the tower wall. The shadows there are deeper tonight. Still, waiting. And you remember the message from earlier? Midnight. The old tower stair. Your breath catches slightly. The tower looms just beyond your chamber. The hour is approaching. Someone awaits you in its cold, winding heart. You close your eyes for a moment, gathering your strength. You will rest briefly. Then you will rise again, and you will walk into the oldest shadows of the palace. For now, though, you exhale slowly, letting the bed cradle you, letting the hour draw nearer, letting sleep tug at your limbs with gentle fingers just for a little while. Your day is nearly done, but the night still has one more secret to show you. You lie in the dim warmth of your bed, wrapped in blankets, drifting in that soft space between waking and sleep. The brazier glows faintly. The tapestries breathe with the currents of night air. For a moment, everything in the palace is still, quiet, almost safe. Then, the bells of the distant chapel toll one slow note. Midnight. Your eyes open. The message returns to you like a whisper carried on cold air. Midnight. The old tower stair. You exhale, gather yourself, and rise from the bed with the reluctant grace of someone who very much prefers pillows to intrigue. Your attendants are gone. The guards remain one inside your chamber, standing at muted attention. He straightens when he sees you stir. "I need solitude," you murmur softly. The guard bows. He does not question. Royal commands spoken at midnight in a half-whisper often fall under the category of things I do not want to know more about. You wrap a thick cloak around your shoulders, slip into soft-soled shoes, and move toward the hidden passage that branches off your chamber, one known only to a handful of people. The stone is colder here, thicker. The torch you carry flickers wildly, as if anxious for what lies ahead. The tower looms above you in the darkness, an ancient structure older than much of the palace, built in a time when defense mattered more than comfort. Its stairwell spirals upward like the inside of a coiled serpent, narrow and steep. A mainstream historical fact climbs the steps with you. Medieval towers often doubled as safe rooms, watch posts, or private meeting spaces. Their isolation made them ideal for secret exchanges or conspiracies no one wanted documented. Many monarchs used these hidden spaces to speak with advisors, messengers, or visitors whose presence would raise eyebrows during daylight. Tonight, you move quietly up your torchlight, casting trembling shadows along the rough stone walls. The stairs are uneven. Drafts slip through cracks like cold fingers brushing your ankles. Each step echoes faintly, swallowed by the tower's ancient throat. Halfway up, you hear something. A footstep. Not yours. Soft. Cautious. Ahead. Your pulse quickens, but not with fear, more with a bone-deep awareness that in this life, every secret meeting carries weight. You reach the landing. A thin window lets in a slice of moonlight so pale it looks like breath frozen in place. Someone stands by the wall, cloaked, hood drawn low. "Your Majesty," the figure whispers. Their voice is familiar, low, steady, the voice of one of your most trusted advisors. They hand you a sealed parchment, unmarked but weighted with urgency. "There are movements among the nobles," they murmur. "Talk of alliances, talk of uncertainty, talk of succession." You breathe slowly, not in shock but in recognition. This is the undercurrent of every medieval court. Power shifts. Ambitions awaken. Rumors grow like vines in darkness. "Nothing immediate," the advisor continues, "but enough that you should know. Enough that the crown must be vigilant. Enough that you cannot rely only on your public counsel." You take the parchment. The wax seal cracks softly between your fingers. Inside are names, locations, patterns, none alarming alone but together, a map of tension forming beneath the surface of your kingdom. Historians still argue whether medieval conspiracies were as common as chronicles claim, or whether fear exaggerated shadows into monsters. But here, in the cold stone quiet, you feel the truth. Even if half the rumors are smoke, the other half always hides fire. You speak with your advisor in hushed tones, choosing words with the precision of a bladesmith. You discuss preparations, loyalty, subtle diplomacy. You speak of calming factions, strengthening bonds, and reinforcing your authority, not with force, but with presence. And then quietly, heavily, the meeting ends. Your advisor bows and melts back into the darkness, leaving you alone on the ancient landing with only the torch crackling softly beside you. You descend the stair slowly, each step softer than the last, your mind turning the information over like a stone warmed by thought. The palace is still, the night deep, the danger not immediate, but real. When you return to your bedchamber, the brazier glows faintly, still waiting for you. You shed your cloak, slip beneath the warm blankets, and let the curtains fall gently around you. Your eyes close, your breathing steadies, and the weight of the crown rests not on your head now, but deep inside your thoughts. Your day, this long, strange, winding day, is finally complete. The palace quiets around you, settling into a slow, ancient rhythm as you sink deeper into your bed. The blankets warm your legs. The brazier breathes its soft glow against the stone walls. Every sound a distant footstep. The faint sigh of wind through the tower softens into something gentle, something small, something that asks nothing from you. Your thoughts drift, loosening their grip one by one. The worries of the court fade into the background, dissolving into the same shadows that used to crowd your hallways. Even the midnight meeting feels distant now, like a story told earlier in the evening that no longer asks for action. Not here, not in this quiet. You let your muscles relax, slowly, gradually. Your shoulders sink deeper into the mattress. Your hands unclench. Your breath finds that calm, steady rhythm like the slow turning of pages or the soft sway of curtains in a night breeze. The castle around you becomes less a place of responsibility and more a shelter, a warm cocoon where nothing urgent can reach you. Your mind drifts to the simple sensations, the softness of the linen beneath your cheek, the weight of the blankets pressing lightly into you, the way the faint warmth of the brazier brushes your skin like a whisper. Even the darkness feels comforting now, wrapping around you like a familiar cloak, safe, quiet, endless. You allow yourself to imagine the sounds beyond the walls, not the bustle of the day, but the soft hum of life resting, the quiet beat of the night, the slow turning stars, all moving gently, peacefully, asking nothing of you but to drift with them. Your breathing deepens, your thoughts thin, you are warm, you are safe, and the long day has finally released you.